Hi, boys and girls. It's Mrs. Demeter. Happy Tuesday. I hope you had a great night last night and are ready to learn today. So, remember yesterday when I did my instructional video on literacy and I talked about the book, A Case of the Bad Stripes, or A Bad Case of the Stripes? This book, yesterday when we did it, we went and we did a storyboard right after it. And we talked about all of the different story elements of the book. We talked about the characters, the setting. We also talked about that the setting may be when the story takes place, right? That might be even more important sometimes than where. For example, in The Case of the Bad Stripes, at the very beginning of the story, it told us that when Camila was getting ready, it was her first day of school, which made this story more important at that part for the setting, because the first day of school is exciting. Camila's so excited to go to school, but she's nervous. And then, of course, all of these problems start happening. So the setting can be the where the story takes place, but it also can be the when. Then we talked about the main characters of the story, and of course this one centered around Camila, so she was our main character. And we went on to talk about the different problems that we're having, right? And they got bigger because we have to just list each part of the problem when it gets bigger. And then, of course, we came to our solution in the end, that when she ate the lima beans, with the help of the old lady, the solution was solved and she turned back to her normal self. So we talked about that. You are going to be seeing the storyboard a lot. And you're going to have to start doing this on your own when you read stories for Mrs. Demeter. Remember, we also talked about when we're reading, after we read, of course, when we read the actual text, we're in our reading voice. But after we read, we keep thinking about the story in our thinking voice, right? Way beyond after we read the text word for word, we begin to think about the text. And sometimes, like I told you yesterday, even after, it could be hours after I've read something, my mind still might be thinking about that text. That's what I want you to focus on. I want you to really focus on thinking about the text after you read it, because that is really the meaning of the text. So, what we're going to do today for our lesson is we're going to read a short passage here, a little story, and then we're going to do our story elements chart. I want you to really pay attention because Mrs. Demeter is going to have you do one on your own, and you're going to have to fill out the chart. Now, I don't mind if you print the chart, or you can even draw your own chart. It's really not that complicated. You just draw a big box and divide it up into sections and take a picture of it and send it to me, or you can just fill it in right in on Seesaw when I attach this to the Seesaw activity. It's up to you. I know sometimes for me it's hard to write in these boxes on Seesaw, so I kind of just would probably just draw mine, and I did that earlier on a big chart you'll see in a minute. It's really not that complicated, but it's up to you, whatever's the easiest for you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read this story, and as I'm reading it, because I'm going to just read in my reading voice while you're thinking, which is the great part about when someone's reading to you, you can listen and think as I read. But I'm going to read through the whole story, and then we're going to pick apart those story elements from this story. And again, very similar to an activity that you're going to get to do on your own. Okay, so as I read, if you can see this, you can follow along. I'm going to read from here just so that I can see it a little better. Brian, Emily, and Stephen were at Longwater Beach with their dad. All three kids were looking forward to their dad playing with them. But when they got there, he didn't. At first, they tried to build sandcastles, but the sand wasn't packing very well. After swimming for a while, they noticed that their dad was still dressed and hadn't changed into his swim trunks. They decided it would be fun to surprise him. They pretended to still be building sandcastles, but they sat quietly in the sand with their buckets full of water and waited until he started to walk over to get changed. When he walked past, they jumped up and splashed water on him. Then their dad got his swim trunks on so they could all swim together. Okay, so again, a very short passage, right? Very short story, but we're going to take that and we are going to do a storyboard on it. Now, for now, of course, like I said, you can write right on yours. You can write right on Seesaw. Mrs. Demeter, today I'm going to use Post-it notes because I am going to, I'm going to probably use this poster again. So I don't want to write right on it because I want to use it again. So hopefully you can kind of see that. I'm going to move this a little closer. So here is my storyboard that I kind of made. And again, I just quickly kind of drew boxes and then I pasted my parts there, but you wouldn't even have to have that. Okay, so we're going to identify the setting and the main characters and the wants. And remember, the heart represents the wants. The heart represents what do the characters or character want to happen, or what are they wanting out of the story. So the setting, when we talk about the setting, it said that it took place on Longwater Beach. So I'm going to put my setting there because we know that it took place on Longwater Beach, right? The when, it didn't really tell us the when. It just, really this part, the setting, the most important part of the setting is the where. It's at a beach, right? That's the gist of the story. The characters in the story, there were more than one character. There was Brian, there was Emily, and there was Stephen. And you know what else? And Dad wasn't there. I'm gonna add Dad to here. So those are our characters, right? And really they were kind of all in there equally. So I don't think that there was just one main character like with Camila in the case of the Bad Stripes. And their heart, their want, the kids' want was for Dad to play with them. That's all they wanted. They wanted Dad to play with them, right? Now again, we think of the problem being right in the middle of the story, which it usually is towards the middle, but it's kind of sometimes at the beginning, right? And I know this is a short story, so the problem started really quickly in the story. So the problem that we had, and remember, here's what I said about third grade, because I talked to Miss Reef this morning, and she does the same thing. So if you were in Miss Reef's class last year, you probably remember this storyboard. But she had it smaller in the middle. She didn't have it where you had to extend the details because you're in third grade now. So you're going to extend those details because you're going to write more in third grade, right? So obviously this is a planning chart. I'm not putting it in complete sentences yet. So this is kind of just plotting out what I'm going to put into sentences when I actually write it. So this is what's awesome, because then you have all of your plots that you can put together into your writing. So the problem, right? Dad didn't play. That was our first problem, right? He didn't play. He didn't want to play. He didn't play. The kids were kind of upset. But then we can't just stop there, right? Because we have to talk about the problem getting worse or bigger. Well, they tried to build a sandcastle, right? Didn't work out. So that was the other problem. Not only did Dad not want to play, but they tried to build the sandcastle, and that didn't really work out either. And sat quietly in the sand with the water, right? Dad just kind of sat there, moped around, wasn't really excited, wasn't real happy. So those were kind of things that happened along the way with the problem. And then, of course, we come to our solution. Because once we have all of this set in place, the solution usually comes right at the end, because the end of the story has the solution. So the solution can either be, remember we said, solved by one person or the main character, or it can be solved by multiple people or things, right? In this case, I'm sorry, my computer here went out. In this case, it was kind of a hand-in-hand thing with the kids, right? They all helped together to solve the solution. They dumped water on Dad, right? They tried to make him laugh. They tried to make it fun, so they dumped water on Dad, so that was part of the solution. And then, of course, Dad then went to get his swim trunks on so that he could swim and they all could swim together. So there can be more than one part to the solution, right? And now, if I were to go and write this summary and retell this story, I have it all planned out on my storyboard. So it'd be super easy. So when Miss Demeter asks you to write a summary, if you plot it out on your storyboard first, and you don't want to put complete sentences here. These are just ideas, right? And then when you go to write your summary of your story or your book, you can take each idea that you wrote and put it together into sentences. And you already have your summary written. And you already have retold the entire story with the help of your notes from your thinking voice that you were thinking about from the story. So, Mrs. Demeter is going to give you a story in your next activity on Seesaw, which is going to be this story. And I know it looks a little long, but I can promise you that the words in it are great and they're not hard, and I think that you will be able to read it because you're all wonderful readers. If you can't, then of course you can have somebody at home read it for you. But I'm going to put this on for you, one of your Seesaw activities for tomorrow. So this is going to be your story, and we will talk about it a little bit more in our small groups as well, because you're going to start doing this with your small group books too. So this is going to be your story that you're going to read, and of course I'll take a picture of it and send it to you in Seesaw in the activity. And then you're going to do the storyboard with the story elements of this story, just like we did, okay? Now you can do it in a couple ways. Like I said, if you wanted to print this off, if you have a printer at home, which you don't have to have, but if you do and you wanted to print it off and write it, that's totally fine and up to you. Or if you just want to draw your own boxes and write it in on paper and take a picture and send it, that's okay. Or obviously you could just write right on Seesaw or type it into here, okay? I do want to see the actual wording. You can click on the mic and you can discuss it with me and go over it as well, but I want to see actually what you put on here. And remember, when you put your story elements on, they don't have to be complete sentences yet, okay? These are just ideas that you're plotting on there, all right? So I want you to remember, here's the thing about my videos, what's so awesome, is that if you forget how to do it, because sometimes I have to watch something a few times, you can go back to what we did together and you can look at this one to kind of help you through and guide you along. But remember, this middle part, I don't want just one problem. I want a few extra details of the problem getting bigger or worse, okay? So I don't want to just see one thing in the problem, because the problem is probably going to get bigger and worse. And I want to know, how did it get bigger and worse, okay? All right, so tomorrow, and again, I will remind you, but now tomorrow there's going to be a new video of new material. So make sure that you remember what you're doing for tomorrow with this. You'll have this story, this storyboard with story elements that you're going to have to put from the story into your storyboard for Mrs. Demeter tomorrow, okay? All right, I will see you guys at 9:30 for our whole group class meeting.